Hello, my name's Richard Felix, and over the past 12 years I've been conducting ghost walks around the city of Derby. In that 12 years I must have taken well over 150,000 people on a ghost tour around the city. Over the last 2.5 years I've been doing the National Ghost Tour of Great Britain, and I've visited nearly every county of this country, looking for ghosts, talking to people who have seen ghosts, and visiting haunted places, and recording them on video and DVD. And I consider myself now an expert in the paranormal. What I'm going to do on this video is teach you some of the things that I've learnt. I'll be calling on various experts to help me, folklorists and parapsychologists. We'll be telling you of ghostly stories, I'll be telling you what ghosts really are, and we'll be using various equipment and showing you how to use it to detect paranormal activity. And the whole aim of this video is to teach you how to become a ghost hunter. Now, before you actually go ghost hunting, you really do need to understand what a ghost is. And I've got my own ideas on ghosts. I think there must be at least 5 different sorts of ghosts. But I brought CJ in on this because CJ is actually a parapsychologist, and between us I think we'll probably be able to deal with all sorts of hauntings. I believe that ghosts haunt places for various reasons, and I think the best thing we can do is actually discuss each one. Number one being the dead returning.
Yeah, the classic ghost, when it's supposedly a dead guy or a dead woman who's returned and whose spirit is seeking some kind of closure, or who still walks where they were. But of course the dead guy, the ghost, is aware of its environment, so it can interact with us. It
can speak to people, it knows you're there, which I think personally is probably the most frightening thing of all.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that it is apparently a conscious entity that survived death and is able to do something to us.
Yeah, that's horrid. And I believe that they are usually, as you've said, they've either got business that they haven't concluded on this earth, they're trapped for whatever reason, they don't know where they're going, they should go to wherever good souls should go, to the light or whatever, and for some reason, for some accident, they are trapped on this earth.
Well, of course, in the Middle Ages there was a strong belief in purgatory, a kind of state between heaven and hell where one spent time before passing on.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these people appear to be associated with not having been buried in the correct manner. Whatever the religious rites they were expecting, they didn't receive them. Time and time again, if you look, human bones and remains are found near where ghosts are seen. And sometimes the bones are found, years after the ghosts have been seen.
Yeah. In other words, they craved a decent burial, much more than they do today. And because they didn't get the last rites, burial in consecrated ground or whatever it happens to be, they're still waiting, if you like, for that event to happen for their decent burial.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes no sense to me, or perhaps to you, but from a medieval perspective, it may have made a great deal more sense. And the idea that your bones must be properly interred.
Oh, yeah.
It is fascinating, this connection between the human body and the spirit.
Yeah. Something, strangely enough, I was talking to a lady in Cornwall about this subject, and she believes that a lot of ghosts still haunt because of the church's influence and sort of heaven and hell and eternal damnation, that because they'd done something that they believed was wrong, that would probably mean that they would end up going down rather than up, that they actually daren't go on to where they needed to go to, and so of course they hover.
They remain here.
They remain here.
Trapped. And in fact, if you look, in the past there's a very strong tradition of people being damned by curses to walk the earth as a ghost for their crimes.
Yeah.
It's a common folk belief that those who have actually committed terrible, murderous crimes are forced to remain forever, repenting on this earth.
Yeah, yeah. Now I believe that's why we don't see so many modern ghosts, because that fear doesn't seem to be with us in the same way as it was certainly in medieval times.
Yeah, I mean, in the past there was also a differentiation made between the spirit and the soul.
Yeah.
And a human body has a body, a spirit and a soul. and it was the spirit that was believed to remain on the earth, something like our modern idea of mind, who we are, but the soul would still go to its ultimate reward.
Yeah.
So the spirits are... But, that's medieval metaphysics for you.
Yeah, so that is the spirit of a real person. That is an entity.
That is a person. And I mean, one of the problems is that very often I can see people, going out there with their high-tech cameras and their gadgetry. And if they are dealing with a real person, a living person who once lived here, who had emotions, who loved, who did all the things we do, if you were dead, how would you feel if a bunch of high-tech ghost hunters came round and tried to... There's an old German proverb which says, when the ghost hunter arrives, the ghost flies out of the window.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes wonder if it is the most appropriate way when we're pointing our laser temperature readers around, etc.
Exactly, that's why often people don't catch anything. Yeah. And number 2, we've got the apparition.
Yeah, now the apparition. Would you like to explain your theory?
Well, my theory is that traumatic, tragic, premature death causes a recording in the fabric of a building, possibly even in the soil. The energy used by the body in resisting death, the electronic impulses given off by the brain, possibly moments before death take place, can be so immense that I believe that the event just before death can be recorded into the fabric. In other words, you have to be alive still to make that recording.
Yeah.
It's not done when you're dead. And that's why you see them with clothes on. That's why you see them as they were just before they died. But of course they're not there any more than John Wayne is there when you press the replay button of a video player.
Yeah.
And it's doing exactly the same things it did just before it died. And I think over years and years it tends to fade away.
Yeah, the half-life theory, that over the years there was a classic case of a ghost that was seen in the 18th century as a red lady.
Yeah.
In the 19th century there was a pink lady. By the end of the 19th century there was a white lady who was very dim. In the early 20th century a pillar of mist, and nowadays only the footsteps are heard.
Yeah.
So, that would imply that ghosts may well fade with time, as if they were deteriorating recordings if you play a cassette tape too many times. I think that's a good explanation of the recording theory. One of the interesting things is, of course, that the recording will very often just play out the same scene again, again and again and again. And it won't be aware in any way of us.
It doesn't know you're there. It doesn't wave to you. It can't interact with you because it's not there.
Yeah, in fact, for years I believed that they were probably the most common kind of ghost.
Yeah.
But from my experience in the field, I found that you find less evidence of that than the apparently intelligent spirit. And I find that interesting, and I've spent a great deal of time going through the archives of parapsychology and psychical research.
So there are more actual spirits, the dead returning, in other words.
There appears to be stronger evidence, in my opinion, for some kind of interactive intelligence, however ridiculous that may appear, a dead guy being around, than there does actually for the recording. But maybe that's just my prejudices.
Yeah. Then there's the crisis type of apparition, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah, a telepathic projection at the moment of great. The classic story: somebody who's on a mountain and their wife sees them and calls for help, or somebody who was in the trenches and who was killed, but at that moment appeared at the family home to the family. There are many, many stories like this. Actually, interestingly, some of them the person doesn't actually die.
Yeah.
Because the ghost appears and summons help. And I think we've all had that experience when someone we love has died or someone we love has been in great pain, and we've suddenly thought, well, we'd better go over to Grandad's house now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had that.
Yeah. It's telepathy, isn't it?
It does appear to be some kind of telepathic projection. And that's interesting because it's linked with high emotion and the need to get hold of someone desperately. But that leads us into the next type, the phantasm, which I find the most bizarre of all.
Yeah.
And the phantasm, I mean, the 1888 survey, Census of Hallucinations, the SPR called it, the Society for Psychical Research, they carried out a huge survey in the late 19th century into what people had seen in the way of ghosts. They interviewed people in northern France and Britain, throughout the British Isles. And they found that out of the ghosts where people were able to identify who the ghost purportedly was, 50% of them were alive and well and in no danger at the time they were seen. So the experience of seeing a ghost quite often could be, there may even now be someone sitting somewhere who's seeing the ghost of Richard Felix.
God help them. So that's a form of telepathy again, isn't it?
That would appear to be a form of telepathy, though oddly enough, a completely incidental one. I believe you had a case you mentioned of this, didn't we? We talked about the case of the baker who'd retired.
Oh, that's amazing, yeah. This chap that actually retired, someone else took over his business, and then they started to actually see his ghost in their bakery. He was actually going through the motions of doing what he did every morning, baking. And they thought it was a ghost. They thought he was dead.
Yeah.
But in fact, they found out that he was actually very much alive, but had got very little to do in his retirement and used to sit, probably in the afternoons or whenever it was, daydreaming about his job and what he did. And somehow he was teleported or whatever, however it happened, I don't know, back to his bakery, and they were just seeing him. He was thinking about telepathy again, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems we always have in this field is that parapsychologists generally do not believe in life after death.
Yeah.
Parapsychologists tend to believe in what's called the GESP hypothesis, general extrasensory perception. The idea that a lot of what we experience on these ghost hunts can be explained by unknown human psychic abilities like telepathy, psychokinesis, when the mind moves an object, etc., etc. And some people have even argued, including myself repeatedly over the years, that expectation, when you go on a ghost hunt, so you come here to Derby Jail with a group of 20 people, the fact that they believe the ghost is responsible for things may allow them to use their own psychic powers.
Yeah.
Because of course we all know, Johnny, stop floating your toys around there, and we all know you can't actually, we're all told from an early age that you can't do these things, so we learn we can't.
Yeah.
But if there's a ghost in the building, it might enable you by attributing the responsibilities to somebody else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, power of the mind.
Power of the mind.
In other words.
It's very hard to rule out ESP. It's very hard. I think, to be honest, at this state in the game, though, what we need to do is just collect as much evidence as we can, and that's why it's worthwhile ghost hunting.
Yeah, and of course the big one, the poltergeist.
Yeah, now I mean the poltergeist, again, there are two really contrasting schools. If I give the parapsychological explanation, parapsychologists call poltergeist recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or RSPK for short. They believe that what happens is that an individual, for reasons we don't understand, uses the power of their own mind to affect their environment. The poltergeist comes from German word, or Old Medieval German, polter, noisy, and ghost, or geist. And that's what it does. And in fact, most people think of poltergeists as throwing objects around.
That's right, yep.
But
mischievous ghosts, as they call them, and that sort of stuff.
The first symptom of a poltergeist infestation is nearly always something quite different to that.
Really?
It's nearly always a scratching.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
From the wooden panelling. And then secondly, you quite often get
raps.
Raps, and the raps then build up. And after a short while from the raps stage, you might start to get very strange smells.
Yep.
Very, very unpleasant smells. The raps get more severe, then objects start to move. And it's not just a case of they pick up and float across the room. It's a case of you put your keys down.
Yes.
And where are my keys?
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that happens at that point is you'll find the keys again on the table.
Different place.
Well, actually, normally exactly where you left them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I saw a fantastic case of this once with a friend. I was trying to think back to the date, but it was a long time ago. He'd left his keys on the table. We searched the house high and low. The keys were on the kitchen table. We were the only two people in the house. But what we actually did before the keys reappeared was jokingly said to the ghost, "Hey, can we have the keys back, please? Mr. Ghost, give us the keys." And
back in
there
the
they
same
were, same in place.
Yeah. But there are lots of cases where things move, disappear for, say, weeks on end and turn up in silly places. Things like that as well, aren't there?
We call it in the trade small object displacement, SOD. And, of course, if your objects keep going missing, it's very easy to blame the sodding ghost.
Yeah.
But yes, SOD.
Yeah.
SOD is the correct acronym for that. Something else which is even more fascinating, and which happens in a lot of these cases eventually, is apportation. When apports, which are small objects which appear from nowhere, like the cigarette lighter, but they just appear, and quite often they'll be very old. I've heard of religious medallions from the Middle Ages. I've heard of human bones. I've heard of all kinds of peculiar things. There's a fantastic case I believe you've recently investigated where a small wooden toy appeared and children played with it. I don't know if you know about that.
No, I don't.
Oh right, sorry. That was one of the incidents that happened at one of the locations you've been filming at recently. That obviously didn't come out.
No, couldn't be. There was a very interesting case in Mary King's Close of a child's toy, a teddy bear, I think it was, actually being thrown across the room in a room where a child was supposed to have died. and this teddy bear actually, this was on camera, actually flew through the air and landed in the middle of the group that was having a séance.
Teddy bears are unusual, actually. I had an experience with one myself. We'd had poltergeist activity in a house in Gloucestershire,
Yeah.
and I'd been called in to try and calm it down. And during the course of the time we were there, various extremely odd things happened, objects supposedly moved, but we never witnessed any of them. So in the end, one of the tests we decided to do was most of the objects seemed to move from one room. Now, as a parapsychologist, I'm expecting each poltergeist to be focused on one person.
Right.
But in this case, it seemed to be focused on the room. So we took photographs of the entire room. We had a structural surveyor who checked the walls and checked the floorboards. There was no means of access to the room. I'd positioned a person who the occupants didn't know was there in the bushes outside their house to watch the external windows to ensure there were no ladders. And we sealed the room, and one of the oldest tricks in the book is to take sellotape, place your thumbprint on the sellotape,
Yes.
place a couple of hairs across, tape it across the door, and then use wax to make a seal, candle wax on the door, place your thumbprint on it. And you set up a few of these fairly, some of them obviously so people will see them, but then a few things...
So they don't know where they are.
So they don't know where they are, like a paper cup at the bottom. We completely sealed the room off, went outside, decided to leave the room for 20 minutes with a video camera running. And the video camera is showing a side of the room with a dresser with a faded old pink teddy bear on it and a gas light turned off. About 30 seconds after we left the room, we heard a loud banging. After a minute and a half, we heard an immense crash, which was far louder than anything in the room in reality could have caused. I'll get back to that in a moment. And we entered the room to find that the teddy bear had moved 5 feet off the dresser onto the floor, and its paws had been placed up in front of the gas fire, as if it was warming itself. And what had actually happened is the camera had filmed the teddy bear on the side, but before the teddy bear ended up in its final position, the camera had turned off, and it had obviously been unscrewed because the camera was pointing at the floor. So
that's amazing.
that was very, very strange.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, one of our team started to sing "If You Go Down in the Woods."
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The teddy bear's picnic, and my blood went cold at that.
I should think so.
But that was a fantastic case. Unfortunately, although we did eventually manage to find out a great deal from that case, we never really found what the focus was. And this is the big problem. Quite often, as I'm sure you're about to tell me, these cases don't seem to have a living agent. I mean, people always say, frustrated young ladies or people going
girls reaching puberty, boys as well sometimes.
In fact, parapsychologists say it's normally people who are highly creative, very, very, very imaginative or very intelligent, but who are frustrated by their living circumstances, and they seem to be the focus of these things. The focus quite often also isn't particularly bothered by the events.
No.
One of the things you look for when you're interviewing is the person who is completely calm in the face of the chaos that's descended on their family, and that's quite telling.
Yeah.
But one of the problems of investigating poltergeists using that model is you do need to map out the family relationship.
Oh yeah, you've got to talk to people about
everybody.
The subject. Find out if anybody is emotionally distressed, emotionally charged at the time.
But Richard,
are the children involved?
I'm actually a psychiatric nurse.
Really?
But I trained as a psychiatric nurse in RMN. But most parapsychologists are not trained counsellors.
No, of course not. No, exactly.
And it's sometimes we're dealing with very sensitive family issues. We've got to be careful not to take our own. We're not experts in that field.
No.
So all we can really do, and I stress this to anybody who's going to take up ghost hunting, it's very easy to become involved in other people's emotional problems.
Yeah.
What you really should be doing is helping those people find qualified help and people who can help them with any medical or family issues they have, because that's not what we can do.
No, of course not. So really, in my opinion, there are two sorts of poltergeist. There's either the noisy spirit, as we say, which is an entity. It's a ghost, it's a spirit, it's moving things. People say that they're mischievous or they can be malevolent because they're actually picking something and throwing it. Now, one of the things is, of course, that they don't normally travel. They usually go up and across. As
if they were being carried, rather than if I throw my lighter to you, it follows.
It goes an arc.
Yeah. So the flight path's highly unusual because it's not following gravity.
No, most poltergeist activity goes along this way and down again.
But Richard, one of the things you must have come across many times is the idea that an object can be moved and that you could be hit by a brick, but it hits you with the touch of a feather, or that a pen can fall off a table, but make actually.
Oh yeah. In other words, it is being.
Is
physically, it's being controlled by the entity that is actually moving it. That's the amazing thing, isn't it?
It's working against gravity.
The other thing that people must remember, not to be too worried about ghosts. I've very, very seldom spoken to people who have actually had any damage done to them physically or mentally. And the other strange thing is that when the poltergeist is actually moving something, it very seldom does it hit anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I only know of one case, which was a chap who was reassuring a lady that in the 150 years of psychical research, nobody had ever been hit by a pot when he was knocked out.
Really?
Yeah.
But most of the time,
I mean, that's
they don't.
One case.
Yeah.
And I think even then he said he sort of stepped into the way of the object to demonstrate
Exactly. Yeah.
the object would otherwise have gone past him. And there are many cases where objects appear to have been thrown and spin past the person as if they were avoiding.
Yeah. I genuinely believe that they're not malevolent, they're not mischievous. I think, to a certain extent, it's a call for help.
It's difficult because we got as far as talking about objects moving now. Yeah. Now, on objects moving, they certainly aren't malevolent, but some poltergeists continue a little bit longer. And I think we've got to differentiate between a ghost, a haunting, and a poltergeist because they appear to be very different phenomena. In the 70s, some brilliant researchers from the SPR carried out a computer survey of all of the 500 cases. And they used a computer to look at the symptoms, what happens in each case. And they found there were two clear groupings, one of which could be labelled poltergeist, one of which could be labelled haunting. And they're very different in their characteristics. A poltergeist case will normally be very short, maybe a few days, maybe 3 weeks. 3 months is exceptional. Sometimes a year, but I mean there's so few of those, and that's why they're difficult to investigate because they burn out very, very quickly. And quite often, as soon as the ghost hunters get involved, the phenomena disappears. Which is frustrating.
So, to a certain extent, to become a ghost hunter, to start looking for ghosts, you've got to be, first of all, you've got to be an enthusiast. Secondly, you've got to become possibly a detective. You've also, to a certain extent, got to be a skeptic.
Absolutely.
And really and truly, you have to explore all avenues when you're actually looking into the ghost's history or story. There's an awful lot more to all of this than people realise as regards, there's a grey lady in there. You need to look at why there's a grey lady, who is she, what happened, did anything happen in the building, is there a reason why it should be haunting it? And then the other thing I think at the end of it all is you've got to have a look and see if there's any way you can help. What's actually haunting the building.
Which is what you are very keen on.
Very, very keen on that.
Not. Most people just say, it's like going on safari.
Yeah.
Many ghost hunters are the high-tech equivalent of a safari. They have no spiritual or religious beliefs which motivate this. They just want to see something scary.
That's right.
And it's like either going out big game hunting with a camera. You're just trying to get pictures.
It's like going to the zoo. And actually viewing through the bars the monkeys in the zoo and leaving them there.
Forgetting the fact that these are, at least theoretically, real people with real emotions. That
are actually, for whatever reason, appearing in front of, or whatever it happens to be, saying, will you help me? I need to go. I don't really need to be here. I need to be somewhere else.
I'm sure you know that I have a very strong Christian belief, and I will note that in some poltergeist cases, voices do appear, and normally towards the end of the poltergeist, and those voices have been known to be very unpleasant and to say very destructive and malicious things, and that's quite common. Now whether that's just frustration, the famous What Seeker Wonder in America in the 1800s are claimed to be both an angel and the devil and the ghost of somebody. The Enfield case, originally claims to be the spirit of a chap buried in the local cemetery, but then changes its mind. But these voices, one of the interesting things about this, and I'll now reveal one of the secrets I've kept for some years, is in a study I did of a large number of poltergeist cases, the voices have one peculiar characteristic. They sound metallic and robotic. And I did a case with a family in Suffolk, and there was no way that family living on an isolated farm with no interest in the paranormal, very down-to-earth people. I don't believe they even owned a television set. This was in the early 80s. I don't think they would have known that poltergeists were supposed to speak in this time, So the fact that they reported those symptoms was very telling to me.
Right, what we're going to do now is to actually take you through various forms of investigations, and for that we're going to show you how to use some of the equipment that we've got here. But the amazing thing is that quite a lot of it is very basic, and it's the sort of stuff that you'd actually find in your own home. Now, for ghost hunting, you will need a certain amount of equipment. It's always as well to have a decent torch with you. If you haven't got a torch, candles, of course, but at the same time, that can detect any movement or drafts, which is quite a good idea. You'll need a tape recorder, a dictaphone of some sort. This is very important for detecting, obviously, voices, but don't switch it on and leave it on. What you have to do is ask a question. Is there anybody there? Does anybody want to make contact with us? Then switch it on and leave it on only for 2 or 3 minutes, to be honest with you. That's enough. You will probably get some very good results from that. The old rods, of course, dowsing rods, very important. We'll be using those later. Ghosts and temperature drops, very important. You need a thermometer, or even better, a laser thermometer like this one, which actually detects the temperature exactly where the red light is and sends it back here to this rather incredible little machine. Tape you'll need for taping off an area, taping off windows, a bit of thread, and very important if there's any poltergeist activity, trigger objects, things that may be moved. But it's not a bad idea to have a poltergeist case, an upturned fish tank or something like that, preferably an empty one. And the item goes underneath it and it stops the wind blowing it or anybody accidentally knocking it. And if there's, say, the ghost of a child, it's not a bad idea to have an object that is associated with a child, such as a teddy bear. Now, there is some much more important equipment now on the market, and with us this afternoon we've got Richard Jacklin from Spectral Electronics, and he's got some fantastic equipment. So Richard, can you talk us through it, please?
Well, good afternoon, Richard. I'll start, if I may, with the EMF meter. Ghost hunters and paranormal investigators have for many years used EMF meters because of connections with, you might have heard the stone tape theory, sort of magnetic storage within buildings and the fabric of buildings. So they've been very interested in the electromagnetic properties of the structures. This particular device has been designed specially for paranormal investigators in that it actually filters out mains interference. This has been a big problem in the past.
Pylons, electricity, you name it. Yeah,
absolutely. There's no point for a ghost hunter or paranormal investigator going around the property and detecting mains. Electricians
done it myself.
do that. So this one actually filters out the 50 hertz mains frequency and instead focuses on the frequency range of 200 hertz to around 40 kilohertz. The other important feature of this device is that you can, with a pair of normal earphones, you can actually listen to what the electromagnetic energy actually sounds like.
Oh, right.
Whereas you use a dictaphone to measure acoustic energies, this would actually measure electromagnetic energy. So it's quite a different type of
You can also listen to music with it, can't you? You can tune it in fact. Yeah. Right.
The second device, which I'd like to bring up, is the ultrasonic unit, and this is
new, isn't it?
This is brand new.
Yep.
It's in sort of look and feel. It's similar to the EMF meter in that it has a meter display and it also has an audio connection. And basically, what this is doing is looking at the acoustic energies in the ultrasound region. So that's basically frequencies above human hearing, 20 kilohertz and above.
The sort of things, in other words, we're talking possibly bats.
Bats would use, yes, they use echolocation that uses that kind
of
frequency. Dogs. And this is the reason why this device was actually produced. Some paranormal investigators were taking dogs actually on investigations because they were able to pick something up that humans can't.
Yeah.
And so the investigators were thinking, well, maybe it's something to do with the hearing that the dog is picking up on that humans can't.
Yeah.
So this is the reason for the device. And if you can speak Latin, you'd know that Canum actually is dog in Latin. So that's the actual reason for the naming of that meter. And as I say, like the EMF meter, it's got an audio connection. So you can use earphones, you can plug it into a dictaphone. And some of the more advanced investigation groups and ghost hunters will actually also store information on laptop computers as well.
Yeah.
And you can get some great software which is freely available on the internet for download. as shareware, which can give you, this is a spectrum analysis range, which basically shows you the energies in different frequencies.
Oh boy.
So you can get some quite detailed and scientific results, and of course you can record all this.
Yes, of course.
And play it back at a later date. So for the EMF meter and the Canon, the ultrasound meter, this is very, very advanced equipment, which is, you know, state of the art really.
And available from yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, Spectral Electronics just make equipment for paranormal investigators. That's all we do.
That's fantastic.
And they're completely unique. And what we're trying to do is just think logically. What is it that people are interested in? What are the connections between the paranormal and science, and how can we measure it?
Yeah.
Because everybody's looking for that piece of proof.
Yes.
And you can only really do it when you've got hard evidence and some scientific basis to it.
Fantastic.
And the last device, which is the negative ion detector.
Oh yes.
This was the first product that Spectral Electronics manufactured. Came out last year. Basically, negative ion detection is of interest to paranormal investigators, really for three important features. You may have seen the orbs and things on some video clips, and people have also seen those with the naked eyes. Well, some believe that the orbs have some relation to static electricity and high voltage electricity, and one of the side effects of static electricity and those orbs is actually a surplus of negative ions and a negative ion field.
And that detects it?
This will detect it.
That's what you brought the balloon for?
I've brought the balloon, yeah. So this a balloon, I mean, when it's rubbed, and you're welcome to be produces electrostatic fields, and this device will also produce it. That's great. And when it's detected something, it will give a beep and flash a light.
Wow, that is amazing. Richard, that's fantastic. I want a set, I want to play with it, I really do. And the beauty, of course, of this is you don't have to take it for a walk.
Correct, yeah.
Thanks,
Feed it.
Thanks very much indeed. Now, one of the many things you need to do is to interview witnesses, so you need to adopt some form of interview technique. Now, I'm a witness here, we're in Derby Jail. I've seen a ghost here in this building, and Dominic here, who is also the curator of Derby Jail, has experienced things as well. So really we need to know how to interview people.
Absolutely, and I mean one of the things is that very often in this game you spend a whole night holding a vigil or a stakeout and you try and record yourself what's happening, but you don't ever get to see anything. So maybe 90% of what you'll do in your career as a ghost hunter is actually trying to look at what other people have experienced, and no matter how strange those experiences must be, you must learn how to treat people reasonably and to ask questions. It's much like the police would do. But to start with, Dominic, could you just run through with Richard what you've experienced here in the jail? Because I found that fascinating.
Yeah, certainly. Obviously in this particular capacity I do spend an awful lot of time here on my own. I'm not particularly fazed by the supernatural. I personally don't believe in ghosts. However, things do happen down here which, even with the broadest approach to it, it does make you think. For example, several times I've been in here thinking I've got customers walking through the door. You'll hear footsteps, 3, 4, 5, usually it's 3 footsteps I hear, thinking, oh my God, somebody's coming. I turn around, nobody there. Happens along this corridor, but mainly in the day room. Also been a situation where the door to the condemned cell opens of its own accord. Now, it is a heavy oak door, it's the old-fashioned strap hinges that just don't move unless you move the door. And again, usually followed by the footsteps, that door will be wide open, not just slightly ajar, wide open. Other instances I've had down here, I've been into the condemned cell itself, and every now and again you smell a very strong smell of pipe tobacco smoke as opposed to cigarette smoke, just totally different. Again, I'm not a smoker, never have smoked, and I'm quite sensitive to that side. And finally, I suppose the other incidences I've had down here are whisperings, like a conversation going on behind you, and again, nothing there at all. They're pretty much the main things that happen. There's certain other things, you get knocks and bangs, but because it's a shared building, I tend to look on the normal explanation for that as being the cause of those noises, but I can't explain them all.
Thanks very much, Dominic. Now, what we have to do in this case, Richard, is first of all look at how Dominic's just spoken to us. He's been very open. He hasn't, when people are lying, they very often...
Yeah, body language.
He's not showing any signs of stress. He's completely sincere in what he's saying. And obviously Dominic, because he doesn't believe in ghosts, doesn't have a theory about what's causing all this, do you?
Not at all.
No, Dominic's completely straightforward. He's a very reliable, sound witness. Now, I mean, the first thing is, because we actually have now taped on dictaphone, what we would normally do is go, play back the tape after this, write it out in full, and then look at it as a transcript.
Yeah.
And then we identify what the different things were. The door, the footsteps down here, the smell of pipe tobacco, and we'd then try and establish a reasonable, sceptical, rational cause for each of those. Now, we haven't got time to do that today, but Dominic, if I can just ask a couple of questions to try and rule out obvious things.
Of course.
When you hear the footsteps, is that door open? Is it possible the sound could be reverberating off the walls?
It's quite possible that, and again, that's my original thought, is that it is somebody coming up, or that there's somebody walking past, and it does echo. You can perhaps hear the traffic sometimes in the background, but it doesn't explain when it's immediately behind you.
No, I agree, absolutely. The other possibility, of course, is what's above us at the moment. Is there a corridor that runs above this building? We don't know what the occupancy is above, and you can hear people moving around sometimes.
You can indeed. Chairs, you hear chairs shuffling, and early evening you'll hear the cleaners coming on, the hoovers are bumping around, things like that. And again, you can discard those. So it's, again, being familiar with the building as well helps. Because if it was just a sudden noise that happened now that I'd not heard before, I'd be curious to wonder what caused it. On the other hand, there are regular noises that do occur just in everyday happenings.
Absolutely, but you've worked in the building for some time, you're familiar with those noises.
I am indeed.
And it's one of the problems when we have somebody who's staying, say, in a hotel room or a strange building, or who's staying on a ghost hunt in a famous haunted building such as a hall, is that they will interpret every sound as having a paranormal causality. Yeah. Dominic's very clearly ruling this out. Now, when I'm interviewing, one of the things I always try and do is to look at the facts, what the person said occurred, what their experience was, and the subsequent interpretation. If Dominic had said, I hear the footsteps and I know it's the jailer walking to check the cells, we need to differentiate that assertion from the fact. Dominic stayed very, very, very plainly to the facts, which is very interesting. Very reliable witness, very unusual to get that. Most people will speculate. The cell door, you say you've examined the hinges.
I have indeed, yes.
The floor is very solid. It's not a question of floorboards. There's no possibility of floorboards being involved there that I can see. I can't actually, having looked at it earlier, see any reason why that would happen. Do you have any rational theory at all?
None whatsoever. I mean, obviously, it's, looking at it as we can see from here, the door does hang true. It's not at an angle, so it wouldn't just gradually open. There are no windows or drafts. I've tried various episodes opening the front and back doors quickly to see if the draft might make it move, but it's just such a heavy door.
So you've ruled out the airlock. It's too heavy for that.
It's much too heavy, yes.
Going back to the footsteps, the normal cause of footsteps which occur at the same time every night, I don't know if you're aware of this, is it happens very often at a certain time of year. I'll be deluged with people phoning me up saying we hear footsteps every night at 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and it happened to my own sister. And what I normally do is say, okay, reset the central heating, the timer on it, to come on an hour earlier, see if the footsteps are an hour earlier. With a house that's over the summer, or over, has been, the heating has been turned off, when you turn the heating on in early September or late August, whenever you first turn the heating on, the floorboards dry out, the joists expand.
That's right.
Bang, bang, bang. The sound of stone is very different.
It certainly is.
But again, this is as Sherlock Holmes, the fictional character, remarked, when you do a case, when you do any kind of investigation, a detective case or a paranormal one, when you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, is the truth. And I think, however, no matter how improbable, there may be something very strange happening here in Derby Jail. But thanks, Dominic, and thank you very much. And there was one other thing that I should really now point out, which was on that occasion you saw me record Dominic without asking permission. We'd already actually established permission. You should always ask permission to record somebody, and you should always respect their privacy. So when dealing with a case, it's very often very important to have a signed disclaimer if you're planning to publish anything, or to, for say, put something on your website, so that or to use Mr. A, Mr. B, rather than run the risk of upsetting people. I mean, I'm sure Dominic would not want to be associated overly with frivolous ghost stories.
Not at all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Richard, your own experience was here in the jail as well.
Just a bit, yeah.
Now, Dominic obviously has a long association with the building, as do you. You are, in fact, a well-known and respected ghost expert, so we might expect you to perhaps be more sensitive to these things, but in fact, your experience took you completely by surprise?
No, it frightened me to death, and it was at 3:20 in the afternoon.
And it happened, as I understand, just in a corridor here.
In that corridor there, I was on the phone talking to someone from Derby City Council when a figure came past down this corridor here. It was the size and shape of a person, but it was as grey, distinctly grey. And it went past here, and I lost it because I was in the kitchen. I lost it here. I sensed it as well as seeing it. That's the amazing thing about it. No drop in temperature or anything like that. And I've ruled out everything that I can. It wasn't smoke, it wasn't steam, it wasn't car headlights. It was, in my opinion, a real ghost. And it also frightened me. It frightened me quite a lot. And I really don't have any explanation for it other than that I've seen a ghost down here. The only thing that I did think, and I wondered, and I still wonder, is there's this theory of tunnels, wind that can cause something out of the corner of the eye. But this was not a corner of the eye thing.
Yeah.
It was full frontal, full on.
Now, in the 90s, I did some research on corridors and their effects on perception. And when I was here before, you actually drew my attention. There's a fan unit which comments
That's right.
on the camera just up here.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
And there's a theory called standing wave.
Yeah.
By Vic Tandy in the 90s discovered it, by which certain odd acoustic effects associated often with computer fans or with fans or with certain odd properties, acoustic properties, can cause terrible feelings of fear and anxiety and visions out of the corner of the eye. But in that case, we did once before go through this, and I've already we've ruled it out completely. So I think on this occasion, we have to say that your experience remains unexplained.
I saw a ghost down here.
You saw a ghost down here in Derby Jail. So, yeah, fascinating. When I was talking to Richard there, Richard actually raised a number of important questions and discussed things such as standing wave theory. Now, standing wave theory is being very much talked about recently in ghost hunting circles, but I think really, to be honest, as somebody who's worked professionally in the field for many years, you can probably ignore it on your own ghost hunts for the moment. If it was a factor, you would identify it quite quickly because everybody in the same spot would have the same kind of experience and you would notice the same things. Although it's much trumpeted at the moment and much talked about at the moment, it is uncommon. It's much more uncommon than you might expect, and a subsequent analysis of your work will probably pick it up. So don't worry about that. It's technical, it's boring, and it's not really necessary for the average ghost.
I'm pleased about that.
Okay. So Richard, looking at your experience, what does it tell us? Now, one of the things we know from our research is that very often real ghosts, as opposed to apparitions, appear to be solid.
Yep, that's right.
And lifelike as you are.
Exactly. This wasn't.
This appeared like a misty figure. Now, misty figures are often associated with the recording theory of apparitions. Now, we have in the past talked through the possibility that it could have been mist, condensation. But then you would have to have had other doors open. We've gone through smoke. We've gone through the idea that dry ice crystals could somehow fall on the floor, being caught wet. You understand that there are so many different possibilities.
That's right.
But before we can jump to a paranormal one, we really do have to try and... On its own, your experience would not convince me that necessarily we would need to do a full scale. What we have here is your experience together with the testimony of maybe...
many people
many
that have seen things here. Yeah.
And we have the very fact that other people have themselves in this very area experienced strange things.
Yeah.
So I think what we're looking at here is a balance of probability. And if this was a court of law, we would convict Derby Jail of being haunted.
Now, the reason that I've come to Tutbury Castle is A, it's a very haunted castle. B, loads of history. But one of the real reasons is the number of original artefacts that are actually kept here. And here we have a very interesting original artefact. Now, all I'm going to do is sit down, place this on my lap. You then touch the item, close your eyes, try and clear your mind completely. Anybody can do this. And try and get signals from it. Anything that you can actually get from this item that you're touching, and then talk about it. Now, it takes a lot longer than that, but what I should have got from this sword is death and execution. This is an executioner's sword. It's real and it's original. It has no point because it was designed for cutting heads off. This sword has actually killed people. And so, someone that's trained in this could quite easily pick up the spirits of those dead people that this sword killed. Now, wasn't that spooky? But the unfortunate thing is, it wasn't ghostly at all. And you can so easily be tricked into believing that things are happening when they're not. Because what was happening, that I was in that room there, in the king's bedroom, and this is a partition wall that was put up much later. And these floorboards, these old oak floorboards, go right underneath from this room to that room continuously. And I was walking along the wall on the other side. And by doing that, I made this old 17th century costume move backwards and forwards. But it looked very convincing. But unfortunately, it wasn't. Now, the other thing you can use, of course, are the dowsing rods. Purely and simply by just holding with the hands, getting a feel for it. It doesn't always work straight away. And you again ask it, give me yes and no. That, in my opinion, is yes, and that way is no. But you can also use it for other things, because you can obviously say, is there a spirit in the room with me? And it may well go across like that and say yes. But the other thing you can ask these to do is to point in the direction where the spirit is. And I'm going to try now. Point in the direction of the spirit. Point to the direction of the spirit in this room. Show me where the spirit is in this room. Point in the direction of the spirit in this room. Point in the direction of the spirit. Where is the spirit in this room? Point to the spirit in this room. So according to these rods, the spirit is over there. Now, you could say, okay, you're tilting that. No, I'm not. But if I tilted it, it would continue to go. It doesn't. It stops, and we'll try again. I'll turn here. Point in the direction of the spirit in this room. Point to 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 the spirit in this room. And it is, I can assure you, pointing in the same direction. Now, why does it stop there? Because in my opinion, there is a spirit in here with me. I don't know how it works. I know it works. I believe it comes from here. It's the power of the mind. But I think there's also something that comes from there, through here, down my arms, and points in the direction. I genuinely believe in these things. I really, really do. The big thing about all of this is the ghost there? Or is it here? I don't know. Now tell me something, CJ. If we were to experience some real poltergeist activity, and I mean there's nowhere better for it to happen because we're in the tea room of the Norman Tutbury Castle. Lots of things have happened here. What are we to do?
Well, there's some very, very basic rules which make an investigation like this much easier and much more useful for future scientists and other researchers who come after. We should be sharing our data.
Correct.
So at the end of the day, I mean, recently you experienced on the programme you were making some fairly pronounced, apparent poltergeist activity involving...
Absolutely. Most convincing thing I've seen for a long time, when a spoon flew through the air. Well, what do you know?
As we've just seen, spoons flown across the room here.
Yep.
Right, in this instance, the first thing we would have to do would be to look at our photographs we took when we arrived.
Yes.
Now, obviously, if you're using digital, that's fairly easy, but otherwise, if you haven't got digital photography, it's not a problem. A map on squared paper trying to show, maybe showing where every spoon is a bit ambitious.
Or wherever the item is.
Wherever every item is. But, I mean, we once had a whole group of people dispute whether or not a 7-foot-long table had been in a room at the beginning of an investigation.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So what you need to do is to establish where the spoon came from. Now, let's say we know the original position, which in this case we do. We then take a tape measure, measure the distance, and then, having established the distance the object's flown, walk over to the spoon. Don't just pick it up. If you pick it up, you leave fingerprints on it. If there is a strong possibility of fraud, one of the things you might want to do is take some cocoa powder or some other
fingerprints,
and just do simple dusting for fingerprints. The other thing is, when you pick it up, not only should you hold it in such a way that you won't damage the evidence, you'll want to look for stress or fracture patterns, but you're also going to want to be very careful. I once saw a coffee cup fly from a similar table to this across the room and smash on the floor with incredible impact. I mean, much more force than you would expect. But the chap who picked it up burnt his hand quite badly. It was red hot.
The energy.
Yeah, I mean, poltergeist-bearing objects are often said to be hot. Not always, but sometimes. Right. As we said before, the amount of force varies from the slightest touch from a very heavy object, such as a cannonball hitting you but bouncing off like a feather, to a spoon striking you full on or striking the table full on with a resounding crash. So there might be a great deal of energy. Touch it carefully, check the ambient temperature. Once you've checked its temperature, next thing to do, weigh it. With that formula, the weight and the distance travelled, you can compare various objects which are supposedly thrown by the poltergeist and see if there's a relationship between weight and distance travelled. And in poltergeists, the normal laws of physics do sometimes seem to be suspended or even reversed. So I think this is the kind of data we really do need to be accumulating.
So gather this information together, record it, and if you're not capable of, because it sounds a little complicated to me, then obviously take scientific advice afterwards.
There are so many people you can phone. I mean, the Society for Psychical Research would always be happy to do this.
So long as you've got the documentation.
As you've got the documentation, distance travelled, on your map, mark where everybody was standing. First thing to do, I mean, if an object does shout freeze, arrange a signal like a whistle, anything, just so people don't mill around, so you know what happened. Get everybody to write their testimony of what they saw, independently if you can. And with that evidence, you can check against some of the best-known theories.
Great.
And in the 70s, there was a fantastic theory that was developed over 12 cases investigated using just this method, which said that there's a swirling vortex of energy in a poltergeist. It sometimes seems to be around a person. And the object appears to constantly circle like this around the person, as if, you know, the energy... And then the object flies off at a tangent, so it always flies off in a straight line from the imaginary circle, if you see what I mean.
Oh, yes, indeed.
As if you were dropping a dried pea onto a record player, it shoots off. And it will always go either clockwise or anti-clockwise, but on a line like that from the origin, the focus of the poltergeist. That's the theory which we're testing at the moment. That's the current state of the art in parapsychology. It's very exciting.
And you need more information from these paranormal groups that are actually doing the investigations.
Yeah, because they are the people who are on the front line. I mean, they're the people who... A doctor can't develop theories about medicine or make advances in medicine unless he knows what general practitioners are seeing in the surgery. Everybody needs to know to report to others and share information. There are no experts in this game. I mean, okay, you're an expert on ghosts and I'm an expert on theory. But at the end of the day, both of us respect the fact that the other one could easily make, or, you know, Fred from down the street, who's got just some common sense and goes out ghost hunting one night with his girlfriend at the camera, might make that revelation that changes the world, because it's the most important question
in the world. Life after death.
Do we live after death?
Fascinating.
Fascinating.
Now, with us now is Ed, and you're an amateur historian, but also a folklorist.
That's correct, yes.
Now, is folklore and history one and the same?
No, actually. Folklore is based on popular sort of beliefs. It's quite often based on actual historical events that have actually happened, but it's like a development out of that with added stories and tales and legends being added onto history as well. Whereas history is the facts as we understand them as being precise.
Right.
Now, if I can interrupt you, Mr. Woods.
Yes.
To our right at the moment, there is the North Tower. Where, according to folklore, as I'm sure you were about to tell us, there's a white lady who is said to haunt the top of it. And very often with towers, the white lady leaps to her death screaming.
I believe there's a case of a green lady leaping off of a tower somewhere.
Yeah. So the ladies and green ladies are associated with
Scotland. They're associated with, and fairies as well. I believe.
right. So they're a way of getting back to the native mythology. Now, Richard, you know the history of this building. Is there a lady associated?
Oh yeah,
with it?
yeah. Again, back to folklore. There was a lady who was having an affair with one of the knights that was left here while her husband went off to fight.
Right.
Came back early. The knight killed her lover, died from his wounds, and of course she took herself to the top of the tower and threw herself off.
I think it's quite a well-known story, isn't it?
I'm sure it is. It happens in lots of towers, but it's supposed to be fact. But there's no smoke without fire, is there?
But as a folklorist, you would say that this is a common motif, a folklore story that you get.
I would say
often.
that there's one I've heard a lot of. Yes.
Now, I'm wondering to what extent, as a sceptical parapsychologist, could it come down to the fact it's a very tall tower, and if you're on the top of a very tall tower, you very often think about, what would it be like if I fell
off? Yes.
And that's something common to all humans.
Yes.
Yeah. So the ghost is exemplifying a common human fear, and that's something you often find in folklore. Folklore stories also migrate. If there was a story about a tower 20 miles that way where it happened, the story
It
might
also
attach
happened
itself
here.
It did. The
But
stories
the thing
do
which
tend to
interests
move.
me is that Mary Queen of Scots, when she was imprisoned here, I read the plaque. I'm not that great a historian like Richard, and her priest was lodged in that tower.
Correct.
So she would have taken mass, possibly, in the tower, or at least would have visited him for confession.
The story of the lady in a tower might have possibly come from that.
From Mary Queen of Scots.
Yeah.
Do you think there could be something in that?
Well, it's always possible. I mean, as I've said before, the folklore is not a precise definition of. It's not the precise facts. It's the development of history, and it's also it's also when you mix in stories as well. The stories associated with other people and other places, and it all comes together to create a sort of an amalgamation of stories.
Yeah.
So, Richard, Ed, Mr. Woods, Mr. Felix, if we were asked to come here and conduct an investigation, say we've been asked to come here and investigate the White Lady.
Yep.
How would you set about it? Because today we're talking about how to investigate a haunting. So, what would be the stages you would run through on this investigation?
We would look at into sort of the historical records concerning the tower, as you say, with Mary Queen of Scots being lodged there with a priest. From a sort of folklore point of view, you would try and find out what particular stories there are associated with it, someone leaping to their death, for example. Also try and do research on any neighbouring castles, or see if they've got any similar stories relating to that, and just whether or not there's been any sort of confusion between the two castles.
So you check the history, you go to the local archives, you talk to the people here, you check for witnesses, you'd ask around the local environment. Richard, from a technical side, when it actually came to the ghost hunt, how would you then...
That's a good one, because obviously you do vigils up there. One of the stories is that for some strange reason a candle will not stay alight in there, but then again it's a rather drafty old tower with no glass in the windows. You take a candle up. I just happen to have one with me, and to go up there and try things out like that.
So you would devise experiments suitable to the environment.
Yeah, exactly.
And a vigil, that's when you stay overnight.
You stay overnight. A few of you, two of you, usually two, probably, with cameras, to check each other, and you stay there for an hour or 2 hours, and you literally sit and you wait, hopefully, for something to happen.
You wait for something to happen. Now,
Yes.
as a parapsychologist, I work the other way around. I talk to the people who've had the experience and try and recreate events to try and work out why they had it. You're actually going to actively sit there. So for an important part of ghost hunting is this. What if there are more of you, say 10 of you? Do you split into pairs?
You split into groups, pairs, threes or fours, however many, and you go to various parts of the property that you know are haunted, and you stay there and you do a vigil. Sometimes you do a small seance, sometimes you just ask, is there anybody there? Does anybody want to make contact with us? And you wait and you listen and you hope, as I say,
so it's sort of
that something makes contact.
You've done vigils as well, haven't you?
I have been on vigils, yes, but you never have any fewer than 2 people at a time by themselves.
That's right.
Because you need someone to corroborate
cooperation,
the evidence.
yes.
Yeah.
Is it a good idea to have 2 chaps together, or a chap and a woman? I mean, obviously,
I
if
don't
you've
think
got
it
a chap and a
matters.
woman, there might be
Yeah.
a temptation to
have
think
to
of
bear
something
that in
else
mind,
to
yes.
do.
Yeah.
More boring.
Also, of course, women do tend to scream more, which gets you more excited and more frightened at sometimes.
Do you swap who you're sitting with every so often?
Yeah, you swap people around as well. Don't stay with the same group all
Usually every
night.
half an hour or so, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
That's
you
right.
move locations around so everybody tries everywhere.
That's right. Oh yeah, everyone tries
But
that.
obviously,
yeah.
you must have permission before you do one of these.
That's
You
one of the
need
big
to
ones.
have permission.
Don't just go blundering into anybody's property. Make an appointment, go and see them, ask if they can do it, and respect their property.
Should
is a
you
big
know
one.
about the folklore before you do the vigil
It depends.
and the history, or would you prefer if people were?
It's always a good idea for some. Well, obviously somebody has to know, otherwise you won't know the place is haunted in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's probably best that your actual the people on the vigil, the research, or most of the members of the party, know as little about it as possible. Therefore, they won't be prejudiced. Their view of the place won't be prejudiced, and what they receive or believe they've seen or heard won't be prejudiced by what they already know.
You also need to know a certain amount about the property, unless you've got a medium with you. Then it's probably as well to be able to go and research after the medium has said what they've said, to try and prove or disprove what they've said. But if you're alone and you haven't got a medium with you, you really do need to know a little bit of the history beforehand.
And it's probably a good idea to have somebody who's responsible at the building, such as the curator,
absolutely,
or a member of staff with you,
and
also to have public liability insurance, or just some kind of agreement, written agreement with the people you're working with. Yeah.
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, the big one is that you cannot get closer to history than actually seeing a ghost.
Indeed.
Shall we go and try the candle experiment?
Go on then.
Yeah, good idea.
Sorry, I didn't want to pass you in. That's right.
Now we have with us a candle, a cigarette lighter. We're in the haunted tower, the North Tower, and it's just a case of lighting it. And legend has it, folklore has it, that a lighted candle will not stay alight here in this tower. Well,
I never said folklore was right all the time.
No, I'm sure you didn't. But obviously you must remember that it's very, very drafty in here, but it's still staying alight. I can feel a draft on my neck. I suppose if I turned away and got to here, the draft is blowing, and it still won't go out. It proves very little, to be quite honest with you. It's the legend. But I mean, for all we know, well, as I've said on so many occasions, ghosts do not jump through hoops. They do not appear to audiences. And because we're here with a camera, wanting a ghost to blow out this candle, I don't think there's much chance that it'll do it. What a shame. I shall have to do it myself. Now, Ed, you're also a paranormal investigator, and we're now imagining that we're actually on a vigil. And it's daylight, but then again, it can be daylight.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, through the wall, I see a ghostly soldier. What happens?
Right, what you would do is, as we be in pairs as we would normally be if we're doing a vigil, you would point in the direction of whatever it is you saw, the ghostly soldier, and say, do you see that? You would not tell me anything about what it was you saw, and you would then write down on your notebook, which we should have, what it was you saw, and the time, and what it was you saw. I would then, for my part, in answer to what you said, I'd say either yes, I can see it, or no, I can't see it. I would not then tell you what I could see, or what I could or could not see. That way, that prevents the contamination of evidence, and you don't influence me with anything you say. And I would write then that Richard at 11 o'clock at night or whatever saw something which I could not see or whatever. I'd basically take notes of what it was. And that's how you do.
Gotcha.
Right.
What about this business with the eye and hallucinations and all of that?
Right, that works out is that if something's actually there and you press very gently on your eyeball, you'll see double. If the thing is actually a hallucination and it's not actually there at all, and you press on your eyeball, you'll not get a double image at all. So it'll be from the mind rather than actually a physical.
So in other words, that was an hallucination or something in the mind.
Yeah, and you will not see a double image there in that case.
Fantastic. Now, Leslie, you, in my opinion, are curator of one of the most haunted castles in Great Britain.
Yes, I think we are.
You also take on the role both of Mary Queen of Scots and Queen Elizabeth. But I mean, is it in the mind?
I think some of it is, but I think if you're going to seriously get looking for ghosts, then you have to give your body and your mind the opportunity to do it properly. And the way to do it properly, I've discovered there's definitely a formula, you know, because we've had, if I say tens of thousands of people looking for ghosts here, I'm absolutely serious. And at night time, sometimes we'll get the very serious groups coming in as well. I mean, largely all serious, but some definitely approach it in a more what I would call professional manner than others. Use your sense. Get your body as temperate and your mind as you can. Yeah. Don't get drunk, don't drink at all, because your body needs to be listening and working in a new way. And anyway, the adrenaline that will naturally be coming through you will just make everything hit you much harder. Yeah. So lay off the drink. Try and rest the day before so your body's got a good platform and it's not so tired it can't concentrate. You will be up all night, so give it the best chance. Don't go and eat a huge, spicy, heavy meal just before. Your tummy's going to be rumbling, your body's going to feel like it's fighting with whatever you've just eaten. Eat light food and be prepared to bring snacks with you, because your blood sugar level will drop. Do remember, 3 in the morning is the time when most people die, most people are born.
Absolutely.
The body goes through this terrific change, and during that time you need to have food with you just to give you that bit of a lift. I have found in my time while I've been here that the best formula is the most temperate you are, the most steady you are, the more steady you are, the better. If you're taking drugs to help you for medical purposes, you also have to be aware of some of the things and the way that may impact you or other people. Clearly, if you're taking drugs that might have a slight hallucinogenic effect, well, you need to be aware of it.
And make others aware.
And make others aware. If you have a medical condition, the people around you need to know it is. I mean, not the general things. Like,
No.
I mean, but a cold. I mean, a cold is an obvious and outward visible sign of not being very well. That will block your ears. Your sense of touch will be affected as well. And, of course, taste. And all of these senses are very much activated and affected by ghostly and spiritual activity. So really make your body as fit and able, and your mind as it can be, to listen, to hear in every sense, to smell, to taste, and be aware. And the only way you can do that is being sensible, really.
Leslie Smith, thank you very much.
And thank you.
Of course, many people, when they're wanting to do ghost hunts, like to bring a psychic or a medium with them. One of the things you must try not to do is to tell the psychic where they're coming. So in other words, it's much better if you arrange to meet them somewhere else, pick them up and bring them back to the premises. But there are lots of other do's and don'ts as well, aren't there, CJ, that you should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't want your psychic to know what's going to happen. One of the things you can do is, if you've got maps of the property, you can send your psychic round with somebody who hasn't witnessed anything, somebody who doesn't know the stories, get them to mark on the map where they feel things, and then you can compare that against the historical record and against what the witnesses to the ghosts have seen. And you can see if your psychic's actually giving you the same kind of information. It's very easy for a psychic, if they already know all the stories and they're going around with somebody to pick up on that.
Of course.
The other thing you could do is just create a simple list of maybe 100 words, like happy, sad, vengeful, male, female, old, young, words like that, wife, just words that are emotive, and ask them to circle any word that may be relevant. Now, obviously, they're going to record what they say onto tape anyway.
Yes.
But that means that if you've got 3 psychics and they all say vengeful, child, murder, poison, medieval, then you've got something interesting out of 100 words.
Absolutely. In other words, there's every possibility that there is a ghost in there that actually lives up to those things that are being said. And if they all get it wrong, then they're all...
Normally on a ghost hunt, we're trying to use trial by jury. We're trying to say, what's the weight of the evidence? And we're trying to make a qualitative decision. Are they telling the truth or not? Is the psychic genuine? What we're doing here is we're saying, how accurate is the psychic? And we're using measures which can be used to objectively say, they agreed 100%, they disagreed completely. So it's a mathematical way of doing it.
Marvellous.
And Richard, you've had more experience of working with psychics than me. At the end of the day, how do you feel about them these days?
I believe that psychics have something. I believe there are some that are total charlatans, but I do believe that the vast majority have some form of ability to do these things in exactly the same way that certain people can actually play the piano without being able to read music. And again, remember one thing, I believe in ghosts, I believe in the supernatural, so I have to believe in mediums. I'm slightly out of breath. I've just climbed to the top of the haunted North Tower, and just before we finish, I have a little party piece. I'm a great believer in the stone tapes theory, and I believe that tragic, traumatic death especially can be recorded into the fabric of the building, but especially stone. It contains silica, which is very similar to what you'll find in recording tapes, and I believe that the energy tends to emanate out of the stone, and you see it again. Certain people that are susceptible actually see the event again. Got the old crystal, and yet again what I'm going to do is just hold it very still. Remember, it is windy up here, and I'm going to plug in. I'm going to put my hand on the stone, and I expect the energy to come from the stone up through my left arm, probably via my mind, down my right arm and into the crystal. And the crystal should then start to gyrate, not round and round, but backwards and forwards. Now I'm not looking at it, but I can feel that it's happening. I am not moving. It is happening. I've done this so many times and it still fascinates me. I still don't really understand how it works. I presume it's the power of the mind. What I'm now going to do is unplug and take my hand off. And of course, the energy stops and the crystal stops. And I defy anybody to tell me that there isn't something supernatural in what I've just done. I hope you enjoy your ghost hunting. If you need to know more information or you need to find places to go, you can do it either via books, newspapers, the internet of course, or I have now done well over 40 videos and DVDs of counties around the country. So you may just want to watch one of those and find out some of the very haunted locations in your county. You can find the address at the end of this video. Remember something else, that most people that see ghosts aren't frightened when they see them. They usually look like real people. And the other thing to remember, of course, while you are investigating, 8 out of 10 ghost stories can be accounted for. It's the other 2 you've got to worry about. Sleep well, don't have nightmares.